Hello, another jolly weekend. Let's start in the United States of America and this leading economic indicators chart. We've used it many times before. It's the one where the brown line is the LEI index and the other line is the LEIs that are outside the Fed's control. In other words, by doing manipulations, the Fed can make these go up and down. But if you look at that last stack of coloured things, it's all above the line. It's all positive. Absolutely everything about it is positive. And if we have any regard for this chart and why economic data, PIC data, puts it up, we would say the chances of the United States going into recession in Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year are very, very small indeed. Right, let's try and get a bit of reality into this. An interesting chart, SNAP, the SNAP program, food stamps, and where it's at, man. The light blue is less than 10%. The darker blue is 10 to 15%, and the purpley colour is over 15%. You American people will understand all that better than I can. The only thing that shocked me about it was California is under 10%. I would have thought that California would by now have been over 10%. This is corporate taxes as a percentage of their profits. And as you can see, it's a St. Louis Fed chart going back to 1950 odd. So it goes on a long time and the trend is down, down, down. Basically, corporates are paying less and less taxes out of their profits that they're making. And that's what you would be paying your taxes from, your profits. But they don't anymore. This is retail and food services, and it's real. And it goes back to 1992. And it's an effort to show how well the consumer is doing, I suppose it would be, but I don't like using this consumer thing, but the spending of the people. And as you can see, it was on a ramp up from 1992 all the way up to the recession, really. It had a couple of little hiccups, but nothing much, and a huge drop down. But it's really trying to struggle its way back up again, but it'll never achieve where it would have been if it hadn't have been stopped by this great recession. But it really is making great strides, trying to make the great strides back. The great American public will not stop spending for one reason or another. Will it be enough to save the world from recession? Maybe not quite, but a bit more of that and it could well might. But behind all of this stuff are problems, and problems that you can stack up into the future and see very plainly. This spells it out really quite well. The concept of a retirement age is becoming irrelevant, at least according to a new study of middle-class Americans. Whether it's a desire to reach a certain nest egg number, dealing with rising healthcare costs, or grappling with mortgage debt, more workers are deciding to delay retirement. A quarter of middle-class Americans, defined as earning between $25,000 and $100,000 annually, say they will need to work at least to the age of 80, according to the annual retirement study by Wells Fargo. Another interesting shift in the mindset of Americans is their perception of how much money they need. 3/4, 75%, of respondents said it's more important to have a specific amount versus a date. $35,000 was the median nest egg goal. That's the goal, 35,000. Nowhere near enough, but let's push on with it. But median retirement savings were only $25,000. you can see the future problems. The American people aren't really getting ahead. They're just getting their mind round their now new limited resources. Pushing this out into the world, this is a chart of the AAA countries of the world, maybe minus Australia, who I think should be there. And I've highlighted some to talk about. Let's start with the United States at the bottom, seeing that's where we've come from. It's got the highest government debt to GDP in the list. Nobody else is in the 90s, and I believe the United States has been clocked through 100 now at 102%. I think somebody who keeps it really up to date. So they're through 100%. And one of the reasons why they are doing reasonably well at the moment is that next column, which is the surplus or deficit, and obviously it's in deficit, it's got the minus number for it, and it's a bit old, it's got minus 9.3. That's the annual deficit on the government budget. It'll be down to 8 point something around about now, but even 8% is very, very large indeed. Okay, but that's keeping the American economy going. Above that, very problem is the United Kingdom, with a high government GDP at 83%. That'll be with the banks in there. It would be lower if you took the banks out. But again, why the United Kingdom is holding on when it really shouldn't is the government spending is still around that 8% mark. It's at minus 7.84, and I think it'll be about that still now, which is very high indeed, and that money splurging into the economy is helping keeping the United Kingdom economy above water. A problem for the United Kingdom is that growth rate of GDP at 1.36. It's somewhere around there now, and it's not nearly enough. And the current account, the balance between imports and exports, is negative. In other words, they're having to pay out more money than they get into the entire economy in the import-export exchange. If we compare with France, there are many similar situations. The government debt to GDP is about the same. The deficit is slightly less in France, but we must note that the French people are less indebted, and that's not taken into account on this chart. The UK people are the most indebted people in the world, probably. GDP growth rate again for France is slightly better than the UK, but not that impressive, and its import-export balance is slightly worse. In normal times, both of those AAAs would be under pressure, but the ratings agencies know how critical they are to take either of them away, so they'll probably keep them for the moment. Canada was interesting, because I thought with all the oil they were selling around the place, that end one, the current account, the import-export balance, would be positive, but it's not. And the government actually is in slight deficit, not surplus. Nothing critical there, but it's strange that oil hasn't made the difference to Canada's current account balance. In the United Kingdom, Telegraph, UK, long-term jobless figures more worrying than youth unemployment. Youth unemployment just went through, through 1 million. When it breaks through a barrier, it gets into the mainstream media. Because it goes through a number, doesn't matter. But youth unemployment is grabbing the headlines, but more of a worry is the rise in long-term jobless who are slipping through the net. It is a problem. That long-term joblessness is very damaging for an economy. And another Telegraph article, middle-class families lose £2,000 in savings since the summer. Savings of middle-class families have fallen by £2,000 in just 3 months because of rising inflation and unemployment, a new survey has found. The UK people having to squeeze, they're being squeezed left and right. All the savings are being squeezed out of them. We've got to do something on Europe to finish the week. I think this is intelligent spotting by Alpert. Yeah, Daniel Alpert. He says he's convinced that each time the euro comes under the pressure, the Germans start screaming nine print nicht, lay off the ECB, and they're at it again today. They're at it just about every day, and such confusing things coming out of everybody in Europe. But there's a good spot later in the article explaining what he's trying to say. No, it's not inflation, although that's always at the back of Germans' minds. No, not that much, at least trade, which is, again, always on the back of their mind. But I think he has a good spot with, I see Germany as being primarily concerned with the global value of their assets and savings. They've been working hard, saving hard. Most of their savings are in euro, and they don't want those savings debauched. The fact is that if you are a country of prudent savers with a 10% savings rate and high levels of equity in real assets, you kind of don't want to see your currency devalued. And I think that's a good note there by Daniel Alpert. Okay, I'll just read this. The 6-page memo by German Foreign Office argues that Europe's economic powerhouse, Germany, should be able to intervene in how beleaguered Eurozone countries are run. They're trying to work out how they can control the Eurozone. The confidential-ish blueprint sets out Germany's plan to tackle the Eurozone debt crisis by creating a stability union. That will be immediately followed by moves on the way towards political union. And this is what's important to understand from this. They want control of everybody else's finances before they move to political union or before they agree to pay for people that go wrong. They want the control first. Obviously that'll take too much time, but that's what they're establishing. Let's move on, because that's established. We know what the Germans now want. They want control over everybody else's economy, and then they will agree to merge economies and even do a transfer union, because they know the transfer union will not be necessary because they will have already controlled the finances of the other countries. Ireland. Minister of Finance Michael Noonan has described the release of the government's budgetary plans to German politicians as disappointing, and confirms the top rate of VAT will increase in the budget. Basically, he had to, or just happened to go over to Germany to have a word with Merkel, and happened to take their budget plans over with him, and they got to look at it before the Irish people did, and it's all rather embarrassing. And we finish with this, which sums that up, and quite a lot of the Euro story. Alphaville. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Friday. Quote of the day comes from German paper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung and its interview with Irish Prime Minister Enda Kenny. So it's a link, you see, all of it, all linking through. The first question to Mr. Kenny, or Prime Minister Kenny, was, Mr. Irish Prime Minister, do you speak German? Answer, I can only say good day, but my children are learning. Alphaville comes in with, oh, the unintended irony. I hope you get it. Good weekend.